She was just an 8-year-old girl in a wheelchair. He was just the quiet janitor at the courthouse. Until one morning he looked her mother, the federal judge, straight in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, I can make your daughter walk again." What followed wasn't science fiction. It was a journey of forgiveness, redemption, and the kind of healing that can't be seen on an X-ray. Stay with us. This story will stay in your heart long after it ends. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet heroes among us, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Moment Story for more powerful tales that uplift and inspire. Now, let's begin. The courthouse steps gleamed in the gentle light of a crisp autumn morning. Yellow leaves rustled across the marble walkway, swirling in small eddies as the wind whispered through downtown. It was one of those days where the world felt suspended, quiet, reflective, almost waiting. Michael Dawson stood still near the base of the wide stone stairs, one hand resting on a faded green toolbox. He wore a weathered military jacket, its color once olive, now softened by years of wear. The collar was slightly frayed, the buttons mismatched, one replaced with a piece of string. His boots, though scuffed, were laced tight. Hair, shoulder-length and sun-faded, swept back with a careless kind of elegance. He looked up, eyes narrowing against the sun. That's when he saw her. Judge Lydia Monroe emerged from a black SUV at the curb, dressed in a modest black dress under a long coat. In her right hand, she held the handles of a wheelchair, and in that wheelchair sat a little girl with golden blonde hair, legs motionless beneath cuffed blue jeans, bright yellow shirt tucked neatly. She couldn't have been more than 8. Lucy Monroe. The child's eyes were wide as they gazed up the steps that loomed before her. 23 of them. Michael knew that number because he'd counted them every morning for 3 years. Lydia locked the car and began to push the wheelchair toward the courthouse. The wheels clattered lightly over the uneven sidewalk, and when they reached the steps, she stopped. Michael watched as her face tightened, hesitation, frustration, pain. He knew the look. Lucy tilted her head, looking up at her mother. Her voice, though soft, carried clearly in the morning air. "Mommy, will I ever walk again?" Lydia's hand clenched around the push bar of the wheelchair. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Just silence. Her eyes dropped to the ground, as if looking for strength she no longer had. Michael felt something inside shift. He set his toolbox down. Without thinking, without even realizing his boots had already begun moving, he walked toward them. He wasn't thinking about what to say. His body moved out of instinct. Delta Force, instinct, yes, but deeper than that. Human instinct. "Ma'am," he said, gently, stopping a few steps away just enough not to intrude, but close enough that Lydia could feel his presence. She turned, startled. Her eyes scanned him up and down his worn clothes, his quiet posture, the trace of military bearing still present in how he held his frame. Her expression flickered between caution and confusion. Michael nodded once slowly, before letting his gaze rest on the little girl. "I can make your daughter walk again." The words floated into the air like a match struck in a dark room. Lydia blinked. For a moment, the only sounds were the leaves tumbling across concrete and the faint horn of a city bus in the distance. Lucy tilted her head, intrigued. Her eyes searched Michael's face, not in the skeptical way of adults, but with a child's instinctual trust. She didn't flinch or retreat. Instead, she leaned slightly forward in her seat. Lydia, however, took a step between them. Protective. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Michael shook his head. "No, ma'am. I work maintenance inside. You've probably passed me in the halls." She paused. "That doesn't answer my question." Michael smiled faintly. "You don't know me, but I know what it looks like when someone's lost hope." His tone was soft, not desperate, Not intrusive, just steady, like a river smoothing stone over time. And I've helped others, people who were told they'd never stand again, he continued. I don't make promises, but I don't lie either. Lydia's brow furrowed disbelief, slowly returning. You're saying you can cure spinal trauma. I'm saying healing doesn't always start in the spine. He glanced at Lucy. Sometimes it starts with someone believing it's still possible. Lucy beamed just slightly, but enough that Lydia noticed. The judge's eyes darted between her daughter and the man in green. I appreciate your concern, but we're under the care of a very reputable neurologist. And if I'm not asking for anything, Michael interrupted, still calm. Not money, not permission. I'm just offering a little hope. He crouched beside Lucy's chair, his posture gentle, respectful. Not touching, just close enough to meet her gaze. What's your name? He asked. Lucy, she replied, voice like the breeze. Well, Lucy, he said, do you like stories? She nodded. A lot. Michael smiled. Good. Because I know a story about a brave little girl who surprised everyone. Lydia looked down at him, the hint of an argument forming behind her lips. But before she could speak, Lucy blurted, Mom, can I talk to him again? That caught Lydia off guard. She hesitated, then sighed. 5 minutes, she said, her voice more to herself than to them. That's it. Michael stood up, slowly, nodded politely, and stepped back. I'll be inside if you change your mind. He turned, picked up his toolbox, and walked up the 23 steps like he had 1,000 times before. But this time, he didn't count them. He just listened to the silence that followed his words, and to something else just beneath it. The sound of a door opening that wasn't made of wood or glass, but something far older. Something called trust. Lydia Monroe was not the kind of woman who let strangers into her life, especially not ones who showed up out of nowhere offering miracles on the sidewalk. The courtroom gave her order. Statutes gave her clarity. Reason had always been her only anchor, until Lucy's legs stopped working, and every medical expert she trusted gave her the same answer, irreversible. She had learned to stop hoping. It was easier that way. But something about the man in that worn military jacket had unsettled her. Not in a threatening way, no. He hadn't been aggressive or arrogant. In fact, he'd been disarmingly gentle, respectful, and yet his words still echoed in her mind like a stone dropped into still water. I can make your daughter walk again. It had been 2 days. Lydia sat at her desk on the 4th floor of the courthouse, eyes on a legal brief, but mind miles away. Through the glass, she could hear the low murmur of footsteps and the distant hum of city life, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment on the steps, and to Lucy's face, how it had lit up. You've read that same sentence 6 times, said a voice from the doorway. Lydia looked up. Rebecca, her longtime clerk, leaned on the doorframe, coffee in one hand and a stack of files in the other. She raised an eyebrow. Everything all right, Judge? I'm fine, Lydia said too quickly. Rebecca tilted her head. Didn't sound like it. Lydia hesitated, then said softly, Do you believe people can change? I mean, radically change. Rebecca blinked. You mean like a redemption arc? Lydia gave a dry chuckle. More like, what if someone appears who challenges everything you think is possible? Rebecca smirked. Well then, either they're a genius or they're insane. The judge didn't answer. She just turned back to her screen, though her hands had stopped typing altogether. Downstairs in the maintenance workshop in the courthouse basement, Michael Dawson wiped his hands clean on a rag that used to be part of an old army t-shirt. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. His job was simple. Tighten bolts, fix faulty wiring, replace broken tiles. A far cry from coordinating midnight rescues in Kandahar. And yet this place, these quiet routines, they kept his mind from wandering to darker places. Usually. Today, though, his thoughts were elsewhere. He hadn't expected the little girl's question to hit him that hard, and he hadn't expected her mother's silence to hurt worse. Still, he didn't regret stepping in. Something in Lucy's eyes. It reminded him of Laura, his wife, when she was a pediatric nurse, always believing in the impossible. "Don't fix the broken pipe, Michael," she used to joke. "Fix the fear that comes with it." His fingers tightened slightly around the rag. He missed her more in moments like this. That evening, Michael found himself leaving work later than usual. As he exited the building toolbox in one hand, he stopped abruptly near the steps. There they were, Lydia and Lucy. Again. This time, Lucy held a small bag of sunflower seeds, tossing one into the air and catching it with an open mouth. She missed more than she caught, but she was laughing, really laughing. Lydia on the bench beside her looked tired, but peaceful. Michael hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should approach, but Lucy saw him first. "Hey," she called brightly. Lydia turned her face unreadable. Michael raised a hand slowly. "Evening." Lucy beamed. "I brought sunflower seeds." He smiled. "I see that." Lydia stood, brushing off her coat. "Lucy." But before she could say more, Lucy blurted out, "Can you tell me another story, like the one you promised?" Michael looked at the judge. Her jaw tensed. Then slowly she sighed. "5 minutes," she said. Again, echoing the exact words she'd spoken 2 days before. Michael walked over, crouched beside Lucy. "All right," he said. "This one's about a soldier who lost his legs but not his fight." Lucy's eyes widened. "And this soldier—" Michael continued. He didn't listen when people told him he'd never walk again. "You know why?" "Why," Lucy whispered. "Because he believed that just because something's hard doesn't mean it's hopeless." Lydia crossed her arms, watching, not speaking, but not walking away either. "And did he walk again?" Lucy asked. Michael paused. "No," he said. "He ran." Lucy's mouth dropped open in wonder. Lydia exhaled slowly. As Michael stood to leave, Lucy suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand, small fingers wrapping around his rough knuckles. "Can you help me run too?" she asked, voice trembling with sincerity. Michael looked down at her. "I can help you try," he said. "But we have to start small. No promises. Only effort." Lucy nodded solemnly, as if swearing an oath. Lydia's expression softened, her voice quieter now. "Are you trained in this?" Michael turned. "Delta Force, combat medic, rehab consultant for wounded operators. I'm not certified in pediatrics, but I know bodies, and I know pain." She hesitated. "That's not what worries me." He nodded. "I know." She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. The next afternoon, Lydia found herself driving to the city park near the courthouse. Lucy sat in the back, humming to herself. They had packed nothing but a picnic blanket, a notebook, and Lucy's brace kit just in case. When they arrived, Michael was already there. He had drawn chalk lines on the pavement, a crude balance path. Beside him stood a small red rubber ball, a towel, and what looked like a music speaker. He didn't speak as they approached. He simply turned on the speaker. A slow, calming instrumental track began to play, acoustic guitar, low cello hum beneath. "Lucy," he said, kneeling down, "this isn't therapy. This is play." Her eyes lit up. "First game," Michael said. "Catch the red ball without using your hands." Lydia watched from the bench, arms wrapped around herself, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself hope. Just a little. The late afternoon sun poured golden light over the quiet city park. Trees swayed gently, their shadows dancing across the walkway like ripples on water. Birds chirped overhead, and the occasional bark of a dog echoed in the distance. It was peaceful, deceptively so. Michael Dawson crouched beside Lucy Monroe, carefully adjusting the small padded bands around her knees. They were homemade, a blend of rehab-grade elastic and tactical Velcro, weathered by years of use. Michael didn't believe in fancy tools. He believed in what worked. Lucy sat quietly on the edge of the picnic blanket, her hands resting in her lap. Her legs were stiff today more than usual. The wind tugged at her ponytail as she watched him work. Eyes curious, a mixture of trust and uncertainty swirling within. A few feet away, Lydia sat on the park bench, trying her best to remain distant. But her eyes never left her daughter. Michael looked up at Lucy. "Do you know what fear does?" Lucy shrugged. "Makes people scream." He chuckled softly. "Sometimes, yeah. But more often it freezes them. It tells the brain something bad will happen, even when that's not true." Lucy tilted her head, listening closely. "You've heard it, haven't you?" he asked. "That little voice that says you can't." She nodded slowly. "It's really loud sometimes." Michael smiled gently. "We're going to teach it to hush." He rose and walked to the chalk-drawn balance path. It was no more than a wobbly line weaving 5 feet across the pavement. But to Lucy, it looked like the Grand Canyon. She stared at it. "That's really far." Michael didn't argue. Instead, he returned to her, extended a hand, and said one simple word: "Trust." Lucy looked at him, then at her mom, who watched with lips pressed tightly together. Then, without another word, Lucy placed her small hand into his. He helped her up slowly. Her legs shook, not just from weakness, but from fear. She clung to his hand like a lifeline. "Good," Michael said. "Now let's just stand. That's all. No walking. No rushing." Lucy wobbled but managed to stay upright. Her breathing came fast, chest rising and falling beneath her yellow shirt. Michael could feel her pulse in the grip of her fingers. "You're standing," he whispered. "That's the first win." Lucy looked down at her feet. "I am. One breath at a time. One step when you're ready. Not before." Minutes passed. A breeze moved through the trees. Lydia shifted on the bench, her heart pounding. She wanted to call out, "Be careful. She's too fragile." But something held her back. Maybe it was the look on Lucy's face. Determined. Alive. Lucy lifted her right foot an inch off the pavement, wobbled, froze, then set it down again. She looked up at Michael. "Still standing," he said. She grinned. Then slowly she moved the foot forward. Just an inch, then the other. Her knees buckled slightly, and she nearly lost balance. But Michael's grip steadied her like an anchor. Another step. Then another. She didn't reach the end of the chalk line, not even halfway. But she took 3 steps before her legs gave out, and she collapsed into his arms. She giggled. Lydia gasped, already half rising to her feet, but Michael had her. He lowered Lucy gently to the ground, kneeling beside her. That, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, was a miracle. Really, she breathed. Really. Lydia watched from afar, arms wrapped tightly across her chest. She wasn't ready to believe in miracles, but her daughter's laughter. God, she hadn't heard that sound in so long. That night, back in their apartment, Lydia helped Lucy out of her bath and into her pajamas. Lucy looked up from her bed as her mother tucked her in. He said, "I was strong." "You are," Lydia replied, brushing a curl behind Lucy's ear. "Do you think I'll walk for real?" Lydia hesitated. She had answered this question so many times before, and it always felt like a lie. But tonight something different stirred in her chest. "I think you already did." Lucy's eyes sparkled. "Can we see him again tomorrow?" "We'll see." But even as she said it, Lydia knew she would return. She didn't trust easily, but she trusted Lucy's smile. The next day, Michael arrived at the park earlier than usual. The air was cooler, the clouds softer overhead. He laid out the tools again: chalk bands, ball speaker. As he waited, he reviewed notes scribbled in a small, weatherproof notebook. Each entry was dated precise movement logs, tension points, signs of neuropathic pain. He treated Lucy like a mission, because to him, she was. "You're early." The voice pulled him from his focus. Lydia stood at the edge of the path, arms folded, expression unreadable. Lucy wheeled beside her, cheeks flushed with anticipation. Michael stood. "Old habits. I used to prep battlefields before sunrise." She raised an eyebrow. "You treat a park like a battlefield." He nodded. "Every time someone says, 'You'll never walk again,' that's a fight." She didn't reply, but she nodded. Lucy held up her hands. "I want to do the chalk walk again," Michael grinned. "Then let's warm up." As they moved through breathing exercises, balance drills, and lightweight shifting, Lydia found herself stepping closer, not interfering, just observing, taking mental notes. She watched how Michael never pushed Lucy, never ordered. He asked questions, waited for signals, trusted the child to know her limits. It wasn't just therapy, it was teaching Lucy how to believe. At one point, Lucy looked up at him and asked, "How do you know this stuff?" Michael hesitated, then said, "Because I broke once too, and someone helped me believe again." "Who?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "My wife." Lydia blinked. Michael didn't elaborate, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of memory. That night, Lydia opened her laptop and typed Michael Dawson's name into the search bar. What she found made her sit straighter in her chair. Decorated Delta Force medic, Bronze Star with valor, retired honorably, known for battlefield trauma innovations. Then discharged after the death of his wife, Laura Dawson, former military nurse. Lydia stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't just a kind man. This was a man who had lived through hell and came back building bridges, not walls. And for the first time in years, she felt the faintest flicker of something she had buried long ago. Faith. The courthouse walls always held echoes, bootsteps from long-gone judges, murmurs from verdicts that once changed lives. To Michael Dawson, they carried more than sound, they carried ghosts. He had walked these marble halls for 3 years, pushing mop buckets and fixing light fixtures. Never once had he let himself look too long at the plaques or framed portraits hanging neatly on the walls. Until today. It had started like any other afternoon. A broken faucet in the second-floor washroom, a leaky pipe behind the judge's chambers. He moved through each task with quiet focus, toolbox in one hand, thoughts carefully compartmentalized. But as he rounded the hallway that led to the old military courtroom, now repurposed as a municipal hearing room, he stopped short. Something pulled him to the wall. A large framed photograph caught the light just right. Gold leaf edging, heavy wood. An official Department of Defense seal glimmered in the bottom corner. Michael didn't want to look, but he did. The photo showed a moment frozen in time. A young woman in a judge's robe, Lydia Monroe, shaking hands with a decorated Army general. The caption beneath read, "Federal Military Tribunal Verdict Ceremony, Operation Dustfall, 2012. Michael's heart dropped. He stepped closer, breath slowing. The image was sharp. He remembered that day. Not from this angle, but from the inside. Because he had been there. Not in the room, but waiting outside. Pacing. Hoping. Praying. For his teammate. His brother in arms. Sergeant Marcus King. Wrongfully accused of misconduct under fire. The prosecution had pushed hard. Said he'd violated the chain of command. That he had disobeyed an order that resulted in an explosion. But the ones who were there, Michael included, knew the truth. Marcus had saved lives, covered for a faulty drone strike call, but the evidence was swept away, buried under politics and promotions. The judge had been young, precise, confident. Lydia Monroe. She'd handed down the sentence. Dishonorable discharge. 3 months later, Marcus was dead. His benefits revoked, denied trauma care, lost in a system that turned its back. Michael reached out and touched the edge of the frame. His hand shook. He remembered the night the letter came. Marcus had written, "If I don't make it, don't blame her. Someone always has to pull the trigger. She just happened to be holding it." Michael stepped back, every breath now thick with memory. The noise of the courthouse faded, and all he could hear was a chopper's blades over sand, a man's last words whispered over radio static, and his wife Laura's voice saying, "Michael, you can't carry all their ghosts. But what if one of those ghosts had a name and a daughter who couldn't walk?" That night Michael didn't show up at the park. Lydia noticed immediately. She sat with Lucy under their usual tree sunflower seeds in a Ziploc bag, a blanket folded neatly beneath them. "Is he late?" Lucy asked, twisting her fingers in her lap. Lydia forced a smile. Maybe he had to work late. But inside, a strange unease had settled into her bones. She'd seen something in Michael's eyes the last time they spoke. A flicker, a tremor she couldn't place. When the sun dipped low and the park began to empty, Lucy finally said, "He's not coming." Lydia bit her lip. Maybe he just needs a break. Lucy's voice dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" Lydia's chest tightened. "No, baby. Not even close." She hugged her daughter tightly, but her mind was already elsewhere. Michael sat alone in his apartment that evening, surrounded by silence. The walls were sparse. Only a worn American flag folded in a triangular case sat on the mantel beside a photograph of a smiling woman with kind eyes, Laura. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a bundle of letters tied with faded twine. Letters from the battlefield. Letters to Laura. Letters from Marcus. He unfolded one slowly. The paper crackled. "Mike, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I know you'll be angry. I would be too. But please, promise me you won't carry this hate forever. Find someone to help, not fight. That's how we win, brother." Michael read the words twice, then again. Then he pressed the paper to his chest and closed his eyes. He had made a promise. He just didn't realize until now who he was supposed to keep it with. The next morning, Lydia stood in front of apartment 3B. She'd found the address in the courthouse employee registry listed under maintenance staff. She didn't know what she expected, but she knew she had to find out why he disappeared. She knocked once, then again. No answer. She turned to leave, then heard the lock click behind her. Michael opened the door. Shirt-wrinkled eyes bloodshot but alert. He said nothing. Lydia met his gaze. "You missed yesterday." He nodded slowly. "I know." Lucy's wheelchair squeaked beside her. The little girl looked up with a trembling chin. Michael crouched. "Hey, warrior." Lucy's eyes welled. "Did you quit on me?" He flinched. "No, I just forgot what I was fighting for." Lydia crossed her arms. "What changed?" Michael stood. His voice was quiet. "I saw a picture of you from a military tribunal. 2012, Operation Dustfall." Lydia froze. Her eyes shifted, then narrowed. That was a difficult case. Michael nodded. It cost a good man his life. Lydia didn't argue. She looked down. "I believed I was doing the right thing." "And maybe you were," he said. "But justice, sometimes it's not what we think. Sometimes it leaves scars." Lydia's voice trembled. "You think I don't carry that?" Michael's voice softened. "I think we all carry wounds. Some we see, some we don't." He looked at Lucy. "And some, we're still trying to heal." Lydia blinked, lips parting, but no words came. Lucy broke the silence. "Can we start over?" Michael smiled. "Yes," he said. "We can." He turned toward the coat hook, grabbed his faded green jacket, and said, "Let's go make some noise in the park." Lydia watched him walk ahead, Lucy chatting beside him in her chair, and for the first time in years she felt a wound within her shift, just slightly. Not erased, but no longer untouched. It started with distance. Not the kind measured in feet or miles, but the silent kind that grows between people when something is broken, inside quiet, invisible, but impossible to ignore. For days after their conversation at his apartment, Michael returned to the park with Lydia and Lucy. He resumed the exercises with careful attention, guiding Lucy through each balance drill, each minor movement, with the same calm resolve. His hands were steady, his words encouraging. But something had changed. He no longer looked Lydia in the eyes. He never stayed long after sessions ended. He spoke less, smiled less. And Lucy, bright, observant Lucy, noticed it first. "Mom," she said one evening as Lydia tucked her in, "why does Mr. Michael look like he's hurting?" Lydia paused, blanket in her hands. Hurting Lucy nodded. "His eyes are tired, like he wants to cry but forgot how." Lydia felt a chill run through her. She'd seen it too. Michael had pulled away not from Lucy, but from something inside himself. And as much as Lydia wanted to ignore it, the guilt in her chest said otherwise. She remembered that photograph, the courtroom, the sentence she gave believing she had all the facts. She'd buried that memory deep. But Michael hadn't. The following afternoon, Lucy waited at the chalk path while Michael laid out new exercises. This time, it was a small cone course with pivot turns, a test of core control and directional balance. "All right, little warrior." Michael said, his voice a bit thinner than usual. "We're going to try something new today. I call this the eagle turn. Think you're up for it?" Lucy's eyes sparkled. "Do eagles ever fall?" Michael grinned faintly. "Sometimes. But they always remember how to fly again." He helped her rise slowly, his arms steady around her waist. Her legs shook but held. Each step was wobbly, unsure, but her eyes stayed fixed on the cones, like targets on a mission. Lydia watched, nearby arms folded, heart thudding with every movement. And when Lucy completed the final pivot, Michael crouched low, high-fived her tiny hand, and whispered, "You crushed it." Lucy beamed. But as she returned to her chair, Lydia stepped forward. "Michael," she said softly, "can we talk?" He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he packed the cones with deliberate slowness. "Sure." "Alone." He hesitated, then nodded, gesturing for Lucy to stay on the blanket with her sketch pad. They stepped a few feet away under the shade of a tall elm. The breeze picked up, rustling the branches overhead. "I need to say something," Lydia began, voice trembling. Michael didn't interrupt. "That tribunal," she continued, "I never forgot it. I was young, eager to prove myself. The evidence looked airtight. And I thought, if I hesitated, it would make me weak." Michael's eyes didn't leave the ground. "I read your friend's name in the file later. Marcus King." Michael's jaw clenched. "He was the best of us." "I believe that now," Lydia said. "And I think I've believed it for a long time." Silence stretched between them. Lydia pressed on, her voice cracking. "When Lucy was born, I thought motherhood would fix something in me, something I lost that day. But then the accident happened, and she lost the ability to walk. And I thought it was punishment for being wrong." Michael looked up. Finally, his eyes were tired. "Yes, but not cruel." "You don't deserve that kind of punishment," he said quietly. "But he didn't deserve what I gave him either," Lydia replied. Michael exhaled slow and hard. "No, he didn't." He turned away for a moment, looking out at the field, where Lucy laughed to herself, drawing stars on the sidewalk with chalk. "She saved me too, you know," he said. Lydia blinked. "Lucy," he nodded. "I came back from war with more than scars. I came back hollow. My wife, she filled some of that space, but when I lost her..." He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't think there was anything left worth healing." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But that kid, she believed in something again. And that made me remember how to believe too." Lydia stepped closer. "I don't know how to say I'm sorry in a way that makes it right." Michael shook his head. "You don't. You just live differently going forward." Their eyes met, quiet understanding, no longer strangers. "Then let me do that," Lydia said. "Let me help her. And help you." Michael nodded slowly. "I think you already are." That evening, Michael returned home to the small apartment that had once felt like a bunker. Now it felt like something else, a place waiting to be redefined. He opened the drawer where he kept the letters again, but tonight he didn't stop at Marcus's. He pulled out a separate envelope, Laura's last letter. It was dated 2 weeks before the accident that took her life. He hadn't been able to read it fully before. Tonight, he unfolded it with steady hands. "Michael, you've always carried other people's pain like it was your own. But love isn't just about carrying others. It's about letting someone carry you sometimes. When I'm gone, don't just survive. Find someone who helps you feel human again. Someone who believes in the parts of you that still want to heal. You have too much light to live in the dark. Promise me love. If you ever find a child who believes in you the way I did, don't run. Teach her. And if you find someone who makes your heart ache in a good way again, let her in." Michael sat still for a long time. Then he folded the letter and whispered, "I promise." The next morning, Lydia arrived at the courthouse early. A surprise waiting on her desk caught her off guard. A single sheet of paper. On it was a drawing chalk style of Lucy, standing on 2 wobbly legs, arms out like an eagle. Beside her stood Michael holding her hand. At the bottom was scrawled in Lucy's handwriting, "He didn't just teach me to walk. He taught me to be brave." Lydia smiled, not just with her lips, but with something deeper, something that had long been dormant. The knock on Michael Dawson's door came late, too late for visitors. The hallway of the old apartment building was dim, the soft hum of a flickering ceiling light, the only sound as Michael approached the door. He hesitated, hand resting on the doorknob, listening for a voice. Then he heard it. Soft, hesitant, tired. "Michael." "It's Lydia." He opened the door slowly. She stood there in her long gray coat, hands clenched at her sides, face unreadable in the hallway's yellow light. Behind her, the silence of the night seemed to stretch endlessly. He didn't say anything. He just stepped aside. Lydia entered like someone stepping into a confessional booth, not knowing what they were ready to say, only that it had to be said. She stood in the middle of the small living room, glancing briefly at the folded flag on the mantel, the framed photo of a woman with a soft smile. "I didn't come to talk about Lucy," she said finally. Michael leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "No." Lydia took a breath. "I came to talk about me." Michael's face didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. He said nothing. "I've been carrying something," Lydia continued, voice low, "for longer than I want to admit." She looked around the room as if searching for something to hold on to. Her eyes landed on a pair of children's sneakers Lucy's left, near the door. "I was 28 when they gave me that tribunal case," she said. "Youngest federal appointee in the district. Everyone told me I had to be sharp, detached. Don't flinch," they said. "Don't let emotion cloud the law." So I listened. She paused. I read the file. I followed protocol. I weighed the evidence. I did everything by the book. Michael's voice came quietly. And still, Lydia said, her voice tightening. I got it wrong. She turned to face him fully now. After the verdict, I went home and cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not because I was sad, because I was ashamed I wasn't sad during the ruling. She swallowed. But I buried it. I buried it under work, under ambition, under the need to stay in control. Because if I stopped, even for a second, her voice broke. I knew I'd unravel. Michael said nothing, but his jaw clenched faintly. Lydia stepped closer. When Lucy was born, she became my redemption, my purpose. And when the accident happened, when she lost the use of her legs, I thought it was my punishment. Michael's brow furrowed. You think your daughter's pain is a punishment for your guilt? She nodded slowly, tears now glistening in her eyes. I sentenced a man to lose everything. I destroyed a family. And when I saw Lucy in that hospital bed, unable to move, I thought, this is what it feels like to be powerless, to watch someone suffer and know it's your fault. Michael's voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. You're not God, Lydia. You're not fate. What happened to Lucy isn't some divine sentence passed down for a verdict you gave trying to follow the law. Lydia looked at him, eyes wide and vulnerable. Then why does it feel like I'm the one in the wheelchair? Michael took a step forward. For the first time, there was no guardedness in his face, just empathy. Because guilt is the heaviest thing you can carry, he said. Heavier than a rucksack in the desert. Heavier than grief. He looked her in the eyes now, unflinching. But it's not permanent. She stared at him, breathing shallowly. How do you know? 'Cause I carried it too, Michael said. For years after Laura died. After Marcus. After the team fractured, I thought I was cursed. That everyone I cared about paid for my choices. He exhaled deeply, voice barely above a whisper. But then one day, a little girl asked me to help her fly. They stood in silence. Then Lydia moved just slightly, just enough, and sat on the edge of the worn couch. Her shoulders dropped. Her hands rested palm up like she'd surrendered something invisible. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything, for that ruling, for judging you too quickly, for dragging my ghosts into your peace. Michael sat across from her, quiet for a long moment. You didn't drag anything he said. You just gave it a name. They sat there, the two of them, broken, healing, unfinished, wrapped in the kind of silence that only truth can create. Then a soft sound broke the quiet. Footsteps, small ones. Lucy. She padded into the room in her pajamas, rubbing one eye, her braces clicking faintly. Mom, she mumbled. Are we sleeping here? Lydia smiled through her tears. No, baby. We'll go home soon. Lucy shuffled closer and climbed into her mother's lap, curling in like a kitten. Michael watched the two of them, mother and daughter, wrapped in warmth and honesty, and felt something shift in him too. Not just forgiveness, but the beginning of something deeper, something hopeful. Later, as Lydia gently carried Lucy back to their car, Michael stood at the doorway, watching them disappear into the night. The hallway light flickered again, but this time he didn't mind. He turned back into his apartment and looked at the mantel, at Laura's photo. He whispered, "She's trying." Then he sat down and began to write. Laura tonight. Something changed. Not for Lucy, not even for Lydia, but for me. I heard a confession not from a woman seeking absolution, but from a mother trying to heal. And I realized that's what we're all doing. Trying to find the pieces of ourselves we left behind when life got hard. You once told me that love doesn't fix everything. It just gives us the courage to try again. Well, I think I'm ready to try. Yours always, Michael. He folded the letter, placed it in the box beside the others, and exhaled. Tomorrow, Lucy would try walking again, but tonight her mother had already taken the first step. The park was different that morning. It wasn't the sky, though the sun did rise a little softer. It wasn't the air, though the breeze carried the faint scent of wildflowers that hadn't bloomed the week before. It was the way Lydia stood at the edge of the chalk path, not as a skeptic, not as a distant observer, but as a mother who had finally decided to believe again. And it was the way Michael waited beside the cones, not with the quiet detachment of a man doing his duty, but with a gentle steadiness, like someone returning home after a long time away. Lucy sat in her wheelchair between them, arms crossed, playful smirk on her face. "So, are you two gonna keep staring at each other, or can we start the game?" Michael laughed first. Lydia did too. It had been a long time since both sounds shared the same space. He crouched in front of Lucy. "You ready to get back to flying?" "I was born ready," she said, puffing her chest like a miniature superhero. Michael turned to Lydia. "Want to help today?" She blinked. "Help spot her from the other side. It's only 10 steps. Lydia hesitated. "I might mess it up." Michael looked her in the eye. "Then we mess it up together." They set up the chalk path again, wider this time, more forgiving. On either end, Michael and Lydia took their places. Lucy stood in the middle, Michael holding both her hands. One step at a time, he reminded her. "And if you fall, I fall into someone who loves me," she interrupted proudly. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Been practicing your comebacks, huh?" She grinned. "You told me warriors don't whisper." He nodded, deeply. Moved. Lucy took her first step. It was shaky, the kind of motion that makes the heart leap and hold its breath. Her knees wobbled, her toes dragged slightly. But she didn't fall. Michael let go of one hand. Another step. Then another. By step 5, sweat dotted her forehead. Her arms trembled. Lydia's hands hovered in the air, not touching, just praying. On step 6, Lucy stumbled. She cried out, tipping sideways, until Michael moved with lightning precision and caught her under the arms. He didn't let her fall, just helped her regain her footing. "I got you," he whispered. Lucy looked up at him. Again, Michael smiled. Every time. They rested beneath the big oak tree, Lucy sipping juice from a straw, while Michael and Lydia shared a quiet moment on the bench. Lydia spoke first. "I used to think forgiveness was something you waited to receive, like a verdict." Michael looked out at the grass. "And now, I think, it's something you give when you're ready to live again." He nodded slowly. "It's not easy." "No," she agreed. "But maybe it doesn't have to be easy, just necessary." Michael glanced at her. "Are you talking about me? Or you?" Lydia smiled faintly. "Both." They sat in silence for a long while. Then Lydia reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I wrote this a few nights ago," she said. "Didn't know if I'd ever give it to you." Michael took the envelope, eyes scanning the outside, his name handwritten in her elegant cursive. "What is it?" "My resignation," she said. Michael looked up sharply. "You're stepping down." "I was," she corrected. "After everything, Marcus, the verdict, my guilt, I thought I didn't deserve the bench." He opened the envelope, unfolded the paper. But then I realized something. Lydia continued. "Justice isn't perfect, but it doesn't have to be, as long as the people who carry it aren't afraid to evolve." Michael looked back down at the paper. The signature line was unsigned. "You didn't file this," he said. "No," she replied, "because I realized I have more work to do, not just in court but here, with Lucy, with myself." Michael folded the paper, handed it back. "Good." "You think I made the right choice?" she asked. He gave her a look that was equal parts gentle and unwavering. "You made a brave one." That night, Michael sat on the rooftop of his apartment, legs stretched out, eyes scanning the stars. He used to do this with Laura. They'd lie under the open sky after a deployment, counting constellations, naming planets they'd never visit. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another letter. This one, not from Laura, but from Marcus. He hadn't read it in years. He unfolded it. Mike, if you're reading this, something probably went sideways. I don't want you living in the aftermath forever. Don't waste your fire on ghosts. Light someone else's path instead. Promise me you'll live. Not survive. Live. And if you find someone who still believes in justice, even when it hurts, forgive her. She's the kind of person this country needs more of. Michael's eyes blurred. He folded the letter gently and placed it back in the envelope. Then whispered, I did, brother. The next morning the park was quiet. No drills, no cones, no chalk lines. Just Lucy sitting on the grass with a drawing pad in her lap. Michael and Lydia stood a few feet away watching her sketch something intently. She said she's working on a secret project, Lydia whispered. Michael smirked. Should we be concerned? Terrified, Lydia teased. She's got your eyebrows when she concentrates. Suddenly, Lucy turned the pad around and held it up proudly. On it was a crayon drawing, childish, uneven, but full of heart. It showed a little girl with brown hair, walking hand in hand, with a man in a green jacket and a woman in a black robe. Above them, in all capital letters, she had written, My family. Michael's breath caught. Lydia blinked hard. Lucy beamed. It's us, she said, because you both helped me stand. Michael knelt beside her, voice thick. No, sweetheart. You helped us remember why we need to. Lydia dropped to her knees beside them, and for the first time in years, 3 people once fractured by war, guilt, and grief, simply held each other. No more ghosts, only grace. The wind that morning carried a kind of reverence, quiet, crisp, and full of promise. Michael arrived at the park first. He didn't come with chalk or cones, no speaker, no resistance bands or makeshift rehab tools. Today he brought only a folded quilt, a thermos of cocoa, and the feeling that something bigger than progress was about to happen. Lydia and Lucy came not long after. The moment he saw them, Michael noticed the difference. Lucy's head was held higher, her posture straighter. She had a small red ribbon in her hair tied clumsily but with pride. Lydia looked rested, something Michael hadn't seen in her in months. Her steps were lighter, her eyes no longer shielded. Good morning, warrior, Michael said, as Lucy wheeled up beside him. Morning, coach, she chirped. No drills today. He shook his head, smiling. Nope. Lucy blinked. Why not? Michael knelt beside her, eye level. Because we're not here to train today. We're here to listen. To what? To your body, he said. And maybe your heart. Lydia stood a few steps away, arms loosely crossed. She didn't speak, but the look in her eyes said, Whatever you're planning, I trust you. Michael spread out the quilt on the grass near the oak tree, where they'd had so many sessions. He placed the thermos and cups beside it. Then he turned back to Lucy. You know what's interesting about walking? He asked. She shrugged. That some people can't. That's true, he nodded. But I was going to say it doesn't start in the legs. Lucy tilted her head. It starts in the soul, he said. In the part of you that wants to move toward something. Something that matters. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal object. A dog tag. It wasn't his. It was Marcus King's. He pressed it gently into Lucy's hand. The man this belonged to. He never stopped believing that broken things could still become strong. Lucy's fingers closed around the metal instinctively. Today, Michael continued. We're not chasing steps. We're chasing belief. Lucy looked at the grass, then at her legs, and then at her mother. Lydia knelt beside her daughter, brushing the hair from her face. No matter what happens, she whispered, you are already more than enough. Lucy nodded once, then reached for the side brace on her wheelchair. Michael moved to help her, but stopped. This time, she wanted to try alone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unlatched the Velcro straps on her knees. The braces fell open with a soft thunk against the sides of the chair. She took a breath, then another. And with a grunt, she gripped the armrests, pushed herself upward, and rose. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't graceful. Her legs shook wildly. Her body swayed. But she was standing. She was standing. For a moment, the whole park seemed to freeze. Michael didn't move. Lydia covered her mouth with both hands, tears spilling over her cheeks. Lucy's eyes widened with disbelief. She whispered. You're doing it, Michael said, voice tight with emotion. You're standing? Lucy let out a laugh that turned into a sob. Then, against every expectation, she took a step. It was small, barely a shuffle, but it was hers. Then another. Then another. By the fourth step, her legs buckled and she collapsed forward. Michael caught her, not like a medic catching a patient, like a father catching a child. Lydia ran to them, dropping to her knees. "Baby, are you okay? Are you hurt?" Lucy looked up, face flushed, breathing ragged, and she smiled. "I stood," she whispered. "Mom!" I stood. Lydia pulled her into her arms and cried. Michael sat beside them, silent, overwhelmed. It wasn't just about legs, it was about life. 20 minutes later, the three of them sat on the quilt beneath the oak steam rising from cocoa cups as the wind picked up. Lucy held the dog tag in her lap like a medal of honor. "You okay?" Michael asked gently. "My legs feel like jello," she said, grinning. "That's how you know it was real." Lydia turned to Michael. "How did you know?" Today was the day he looked at Lucy, then at Lydia. "I didn't." Lydia blinked, but I didn't know he repeated. "I just believed. There's a difference." She looked at him a long moment. And then, without hesitation, she reached for his hand, not as a gesture of gratitude, but as something more. Connection. Michael squeezed it once. Neither of them let go. That evening, as the sun sank behind the courthouse dome and painted the sky in deep orange, Michael stood alone at the foot of the marble steps. He looked up at the building where justice had once broken him and where hope had found him again. He closed his eyes, breathed, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, a letter he'd been carrying for too long. Marcus's last one. But this time he didn't read it. He walked to the Veterans Memorial Wall beside the courthouse, where names were engraved in bronze, where flags fluttered in quiet tribute, and he tucked the letter between two stones. A farewell. A promise kept. Across town, Lydia tucked Lucy into bed. The little girl was nearly asleep, fingers still curled around the dog tag like a sacred charm. "Mom," she murmured. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think I'll be able to run someday?" Lydia brushed a hand through her daughter's hair. "I think if you can stand, anything's possible." Lucy smiled faintly, eyes fluttering shut, then whispered, "Nor." Michael said, "Flying always starts with one step." Lydia kissed her forehead. He would know. Outside, the world kept turning. But for three people forever changed by war judgment and grace, this day was different. This was the day she stood. And none of them would ever be the same again. The federal courthouse had never felt warmer. It wasn't because of the sun slanting through the high-arched windows, nor was it the brass fixtures polished to a rare gleam for the end-of-year ceremony. It was something else entirely, a shift in the air, the hush of something sacred settling over a place usually reserved for procedure arguments and verdicts. Judge Lydia Monroe stood at the side entrance of courtroom 4B, heart-pounding beneath her black robe. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of a folded paper in her pocket, a speech she had rewritten 5 times, then ultimately abandoned. She would speak today not as a judge, but as a woman, a mother, and someone who had learned to bend before she broke. A gentle knock sounded at the side door. She turned. Michael stood there in a pressed dark jacket, his long hair tied neatly at the nape of his neck. He wore no medals, no insignia, just the quiet presence of a man who had seen the worst of the world and still believed in its redemption. Beside him stood Lucy, dressed in a navy blue dress with her signature red ribbon pinned proudly in her hair. Her braces were on, but she was standing unsupported, tall, glowing. "You sure you want to do this?" Michael asked Lydia. She nodded slowly. "It's time." They entered the courtroom together. The chamber was full. Attorneys, clerks, families of veterans, and members of the judiciary had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine end-of-year recognition of service to the community. But word had spread quietly that something different was about to happen. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." Everyone stood as Lydia approached the bench, but instead of sitting, she stepped to the center of the room, past the barrier between judge and public. The silence deepened. She looked across the crowd. And then, calmly, she began. "In this courtroom, we speak often of justice, but rarely do we speak of mercy." She paused, scanning the faces before her. "I once believed that justice was a clean thing. Sharp-edged, black and white. That belief gave me the courage to make hard decisions, and the blindness not to question if they were the right ones." A hush fell heavier. More than a decade ago, I presided over a military tribunal that sentenced a decorated soldier, Sergeant Marcus King, to a dishonorable discharge. I followed the law. I followed the evidence. But I didn't follow my heart. That decision cost him his name, his dignity, and ultimately, his life. There were audible gasps, a few murmurs of recognition. In the front row, Michael sat still, eyes fixed on Lydia, not with resentment, but with something closer to reverence. For years, I told myself I had done what I had to do. But my daughter's illness, her injury, taught me a truth I couldn't ignore. That justice alone doesn't heal. That mercy is what saves us. She turned, slightly nodding toward the gallery. Today I wish to recognize a man who reminded me of that, not with judgment, not with shame, but with compassion. She gestured to Michael. Mr. Michael Dawson, veteran medic and now mentor, showed my daughter that walking again wasn't about muscles or nerves. It was about faith. And he showed me that healing is possible even after years of silence. Michael's face tightened throat, bobbing with emotion. Lydia stepped back, voice steady. "I stand here today to formally acknowledge my error, not for legal reversal, though history may pursue that, but for human accountability. To the family of Sergeant Marcus King, I offer the only verdict I now hold: I was wrong. And I am sorry." The room remained absolutely silent. Then slowly, people began to rise from their seats. One by one, without cue, without command, a silent ovation, not for authority, but for courage. After the ceremony, Michael and Lydia stood in the hallway outside courtroom 4B, near the marble wall that bore the engraved names of fallen servicemen. Lucy was sitting on a bench nearby, kicking her feet and chatting with a young court clerk who had given her a gold star sticker. Lydia turned to Michael. "I don't know if I deserved that standing ovation." Michael shook his head. It wasn't about deserving. She looked at him. Then what was it about? Deciding to stop running. Lydia exhaled. "Marcus would have liked you," he added quietly. "I wish I'd met him," Lydia said. "I wish I'd seen what you saw." Michael's eyes softened. "You did. You just didn't know what to call it back then." She glanced toward Lucy. "What would you call it now?" Michael paused, then said, "Grace." Later that evening, Michael returned to the park alone. No chalk lines, no cones, just him, a breeze, and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. He walked to the oak tree where Lucy first took her shaky steps, then sat on the bench and pulled out a worn leather journal. He opened to a blank page. December 22nd. Today the courtroom wasn't a place of judgment. It became a place of forgiveness. A soldier was honored. A judge was humbled. A little girl walked, and the world stood still to witness it. Laura, I think you were right all along. The hardest part isn't surviving the fall. It's choosing to stand back up. He closed the journal, and this time he didn't feel alone. Across town, Lucy slept soundly in her bed, the dog tag still tucked under her pillow. And in the next room, Lydia sat by the window pen, in hand, writing not a judgment, but a letter. A letter to Marcus King's family. Because some apologies should come in person, and some should come handwritten, like all sacred things. The rain came softly that morning, gentle and rhythmic, like the tapping of fingertips on a piano. It wasn't the angry kind that batters rooftops and turns streets to rivers. It was the kind that slows the world, asks it to listen. Michael Dawson sat alone at the small wooden table in his apartment, the same place he used to drink coffee with Laura, the same chair she had once painted blue just to make the space feel more alive. The color had faded now, worn at the edges, but the memory hadn't. Before him lay a single sheet of paper and an envelope with her name written in quiet, familiar script. He had written many letters to Laura after she passed. Some never finished. Some never opened again. But this one was different. Today was the day he closed the loop. He picked up the pen, and he began. Laura, you once told me that healing others was what I was put on this earth to do. Back then I didn't believe you. I thought the only thing I was good at was stopping bleeding, patching holes in people who never came home whole. But you saw something else. A man who could teach others to walk again. Not just on their legs, but in their lives. I think I finally understand what you meant. Her name is Lucy. Michael paused, eyes burning. Outside, the rain tapped steadily against the window pane. She's 8. Brave. Too brave sometimes. She makes up names for every bird in the park, and she thinks I invented cocoa with cinnamon. But what she really is a miracle. And her mother, Lydia, she's the kind of woman you'd have respected. Not perfect, not polished, but strong in the way glass is strong, clear, and beautiful, but carrying all her cracks with grace. They found me when I wasn't looking to be found, and somehow they brought pieces of you back into the world through their laughter, their stubbornness, their hope. You'd be proud of them. I think you'd be proud of me, too. He leaned back in his chair, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall. This wasn't grief anymore. This was release. He folded the letter neatly, slipped it into the envelope, and this time he didn't put it in the box with the others. He placed it inside his coat. He had somewhere to go. Lydia was stirring a pot of soup when the knock came. Lucy sat at the table nearby, drawing a picture of a turtle in a military uniform. It's General Slowpoke, she explained, proudly holding it up. Lydia laughed, wiping her hands. Remind me to never salute near your sketchbook. She opened the door to find Michael standing there, his jacket damp from the rain. In his hand was a white envelope. Hi, he said simply. Hi, he hesitated. Can I come in? Always. He stepped inside, the scent of rosemary and garlic wrapping around him like a memory. Lydia closed the door behind him. What's that? She asked, nodding to the envelope. A letter. For Laura. Lydia's voice softened. Your last one? He nodded. I think so. She motioned to the table. Want to sit? He shook his head gently. Actually, I wanted to give it to Lucy. Lydia blinked, To Lucy, Michael stepped toward the little girl who looked up with wide, curious eyes. "Hey, warrior," he said. "Hey, coach." He knelt beside her, holding out the envelope. "This is a letter I wrote to someone very important." "My wife." Her name was Laura. Lucy took the envelope delicately as if it might break. "She passed away a long time ago," he continued. "But when I met you, when I saw how strong you were, how kind and brave, I realized something. What that you helped me keep a promise I made to her." Lucy tilted her head. "What promise that I'd heal someone, like she healed me." Michael smiled softly. "And you, Lucy Monroe, you healed more than you'll ever know." For a moment the room stood still. Then Lucy did something unexpected. She opened the envelope. "May I?" she asked, her small voice full of sincerity. Michael nodded. She read silently, lips moving slightly with each line. When she was done, she folded the letter and placed it back inside. Then she stood, all by herself, and hugged him, tightly. Michael closed his eyes and let the weight go. That evening after dinner, Lydia walked Michael to the door. The air outside smelled of wet grass and lavender soap from a neighbor's laundry. "Where will you go tomorrow?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe back to the VA. Maybe teach a few young soldiers how to slow down and breathe." She smiled. "You'd be good at that." He looked at her for a long moment, then asked quietly, "And you?" Lydia leaned against the doorframe. "I've been asked to give a talk at Harvard Law next month. Topic: Justice and the Unseen Cost of Certainty." Michael chuckled. "I'd sit in the front row." "You already do," she replied. There was a beat of silence between them. Then Lydia stepped forward, close enough that their breath mingled, close enough for unfinished things to feel like promises instead of regrets. "You're not just Lucy's miracle, Michael," she whispered. "You're mine, too." He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I know it's good." Lydia smiled. "Then let's not rush it." He nodded. One step at a time. They stood there like that two people no longer afraid of silence or scars or second chances. Then Lucy's voice rang out from inside Mom, "Mr. Michael. Come see, I made a picture of us as superheroes." Lydia laughed. Michael opened the door, and together they walked back in. Not as strangers, not as wounded souls, but as a family growing, healing, quietly reborn. The sun rose slow and golden on Veterans Day. American flags lined the fences of the city park, fluttering gently in the autumn wind. Volunteers bustled about, setting up folding chairs, checking microphones, arranging wreaths of red, white, and blue flowers beneath a stage draped in bunting. It wasn't a parade. It wasn't a ceremony for headlines. It was quieter, more personal. The kind of remembrance where you know every name carved in granite because one of them was your bunkmate, or your commander, or your brother. Michael Dawson stood near the edge of the memorial field, hands in the pockets of a charcoal gray coat. His hair tied back neatly glinted slightly in the morning sun. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He hadn't for years. But you didn't need fabric and medals to know who he was. Pain had once lived in his posture. Now it was purpose. Beside him stood Lydia Monroe, wrapped in a navy trench coat, her hand gently hooked around his arm, not possessive, not performative, just anchored. And between them stood Lucy. No braces, no wheelchair, just red shoes, white tights, and a blue dress that fluttered as she walked beside them on her own two legs. The crowd began to gather. Veterans, families, judges, nurses, children too young to know war, and old men too worn to speak of it anymore. The mayor stepped to the podium and cleared his throat. Today, he began. We gather not just to honor sacrifice, but to witness the triumph of healing. Because sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is come home and still choose to care. Michael's jaw tensed. He wasn't one for attention, but today wasn't about him, at least not just him. The mayor continued introducing a new community initiative, a veteran rehabilitation and mentorship program built in part from the notes and quiet volunteer work of a local maintenance man who had once been known only as the guy who fixed the elevators. Michael Dawson, the mayor said, reminded us all that healing is not a service record. It's a decision, one made day by day, one that can change not only lives, but legacies. Applause rose modest, sincere, full of respect. Michael didn't move, but Lydia squeezed his arm. "You've earned this," she whispered. "I didn't do it for applause," he murmured. "I know," she smiled. "That's why it matters." The mayor turned to the stage again. "And now I'd like to welcome a very special young lady, someone whose journey reminds us that miracles aren't always loud. Sometimes they begin with the courage to take one step." Lucy took a breath and walked forward. The crowd hushed. She climbed the 3 wooden stairs slowly, but without help. Her balance wavered only once, but she corrected herself with a focus far beyond her years. She reached the podium and stood on her tiptoes to speak into the microphone. "My name is Lucy Monroe," she said, proudly, voice clear and small in the morning air, "and I couldn't walk for a long time. But Mr. Michael helped me." She looked over at him and beamed. He didn't use magic. He used kindness and time. And he believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. She paused, then added something that hadn't been written on any note card. "And he taught my mom how to smile again." The audience melted. Michael looked down, blinking fast. Lydia wiped her cheek. Lucy nodded once, then stepped away from the mic, descending the stairs with slow determination. When she reached the grass, the crowd stood, not in loud ovation, but in reverent silence. Because sometimes the quietest steps echo the farthest. Later, when the speeches had ended and the chairs were being folded away, Michael walked with Lydia and Lucy through the rows of flags toward the granite wall. Lucy ran ahead, her arms stretched out like wings. Michael stopped beside the name he always came to see. Sergeant Marcus King, U.S. Army, Operation Dustfall. Lydia stood beside him. "You come here often?" she asked. Every year he nodded, sometimes in between. He placed a hand against the cool stone. "I used to talk to him like he was still here. Ask him if I was doing enough, if I was honoring what we lost." He turned to Lydia. "I think I finally have something to say back." "What is it that I forgave him?" Michael whispered. "For dying, for making me carry so much grief. And I forgave myself for living." Lydia gently reached into her coat and pulled something from her pocket, a small slip of folded paper. She pressed it into his hand. He opened it. It was Marcus's name, followed by one simple phrase: "Justice evolves. So must we." LM. Michael smiled, then tucked the paper beneath a stone at the base of the wall. Behind them, Lucy twirled through the grass, humming a made-up song about eagles who dance and turtles that fly. Michael turned to Lydia. "You did good with her." Lydia shook her head. "We did." They walked in silence for a moment longer. Then Lydia asked, "Do you think the wounds ever really go away?" Michael stopped, looked at her, and said the most honest thing he'd ever said. "No, but maybe they don't have to. Maybe they just stop being what defines us." Lydia nodded slowly. "That's enough." He took her hand, and together they began walking back through the field of flags, each step not to forget, but to remember differently. Behind them, Lucy skipped ahead. Free. Whole. Not because her legs worked, but because her heart did. As they left the park, a gust of wind lifted the smallest flag off its stake. It tumbled across the path, brushing Michael's boot. He picked it up, and without a word, tucked it gently into Lucy's pocket. She looked up at him. "Why me?" Michael smiled. "Because some flags should only be carried by the strongest." And Lucy, daughter of a judge, survivor of pain, and healer of a soldier's broken soul, nodded like she understood. Because somehow, she did. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Share your city or country in the comments below. It always warms our hearts to see how far these stories travel. If this story touched you, inspired you, or simply made you feel something, please consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story for more heartfelt tales like this one. We post regularly to remind you that goodness still exists, quietly, powerfully everywhere. Thank you so much for watching. From our hearts to yours, take care, and we hope to see you in the next story.